What an incredible performance from you tonight, Ja.
People are saying you can't keep this up.
Says who?
Grit and grind. Those two words define a 10-year period of Memphis Grizzlies basketball. It literally revived a franchise that had already been pulled from their original home. There's likely some alternate reality where this era never happened, and this small franchise may have been gifted back to Seattle to become the new Supersonics. But these teams formed such a strong connection to their community as fans saw their local identity reflected in their pro team. The Grizzlies were the toughest and most physical franchise in the league. Over that 10-year span, Memphis ended the season with a top 10 defense for 7 of the 10 years. At their peak, they were Western Conference finalists, the greatest team in Grizzlies history, the last time the franchise were contenders in the Western Conference. But they never quite had enough, and age inevitably closed their title window. Tony Allen left in 2017 as a free agent, but would only play in 22 games before being traded, waived, and ending his career. Zach Randolph departed the next season for Sacramento on a big deal where he played 59 games before being traded, waived, and retiring. As we all know, Gasol was traded in 2019, where he would go on to contribute to the Raptors' title efforts that year, spend a few more seasons as a 3-and-D role player before managing to get traded back to the Grizzlies to officially end his NBA career with them. Mike Conley's post-Grizzlies story is still being written, but he's been an important piece of some elite Utah Jazz teams. Franchises don't typically go from moving on or trading all of their core players who have been foundations of the organization's identity into a rebuild that ends after a few years, already leaving us asking, are these young Grizzlies already ready to contend? This kind of transition can be extremely difficult for a franchise. I mean, look at the Sacramento Kings. After the Chris Webber era, or even after trading DeMarcus Cousins, the Pistons were in the wilderness after their 04 title team fell apart. The Timberwolves have made one playoff appearance after trading Garnett. Simply deciding to rebuild doesn't guarantee anything, which is what makes it so scary. So how did these young Grizzlies end up towards the top of the Western Conference already? Well, that's what today's video is about. The progression from the grit and grind era to this new look, new generation Grizzlies team. I'd like to just take you down memory lane year by year, the changes to the roster, the notable events, essentially creating a timeline for how this group came to be. That story starts back with the 2018 roster. This is the only actual season I can really say that Memphis tanked. They finished 22-60, but Mike Conley's injuries gave them the excuse to surround Marc Gasol with G League players, a recipe that was obviously doomed to fail. The coaching relationship also deteriorated between David Fizdale and Marc Gasol, which led to him being fired. Notably this season, Tyreke Evans revived his career playing in Memphis, being given the keys to the offense as a shot creator and playmaker. He looked good doing it as well, although it didn't lead to wins, and it was kind of semi-controversial that they didn't decide to trade him at the deadline because they had actually decided to sit him for 2 weeks in anticipation of a trade anyway. A very rough season that I'm sure Grizzlies fans want to forget, but they were rewarded for their suffering with the 4th overall pick when they landed Jaren Jackson Jr. out of Michigan State. Moving into 2019, the start of the year made it clear that this was going to be a reluctant rebuild. Memphis went into the year hoping to compete now that Conley was back and that they had this promising rookie Jaren Jackson Jr., but veterans like Mike Conley and Marc Gasol were not looking to spend another year in the lottery. This year, depth was an obvious problem for them. They didn't have enough guys to compete with a stiff Western Conference that housed 4 50-plus win teams and the 48-win Clippers and Spurs, as well as the 49-win Oklahoma City Thunder. Being trapped in this no man's land gave way to the Marc Gasol trade. The Grizzlies were a struggling 22-34, looking to do right by Gasol, who had been with Memphis 11 seasons, which was tied for fourth longest tenure with the franchise amongst the active players at the time. Marc had a $25 million player option, so he could have left for nothing, making this deal the best for all sides. Gasol wins the title with the Raptors, and the Grizzlies land Jonas Valanciunas, who averaged a career high in scoring in his 19 games that first year in Memphis. This was also the year of the infamous most awkward trade in NBA history. On December 14th, news dropped of a three-team trade between the Phoenix Suns, the Washington Wizards, and the Memphis Grizzlies. The Suns were sending Ariza to Washington in exchange for Austin Rivers, and the Wizards were also going to be sending Kelly Oubre to the Grizzlies. The awkward part is that because of some strange, still unexplained miscommunication, Phoenix expected to be adding Dillon Brooks as well from Memphis, while Memphis still insists that Dillon Brooks was never on the table and the trade was actually supposed to be for Marshawn Brooks and Wayne Selden. Memphis pulls out of trade talks due to this public debacle, and Washington and Phoenix were forced to do the deal without them, swapping Austin Rivers and Kelly Oubre for Trevor Ariza. The worst part of this all is that the Grizzlies were in the middle of a game as this news started to break. Marshawn Brooks had played 16 minutes in that game against the Heat, and Wayne Selden and he were told after the game that they were going to be traded for Kelly Oubre, which then forced them to have a very awkward second conversation when that trade talk broke down. Unsurprisingly, 2 out of those 3 teams would go on to make changes to their front office. The following offseason was the most important to this rebuild. The Grizzlies decided not to trade Conley during the season, feeling that they could get a better trade offer by waiting to the offseason. The Conley trade resulted in a number of assets that I don't think quite matched Conley's value. Utah clearly won the deal, but Memphis losing the deal gets softened by how many other things they get right. Conley was traded for Grayson Allen, Kyle Korver, Jay Crowder, and a 2020 draft pick. That draft pick was flipped to Oklahoma City for the pick that Memphis used to draft Brandon Clark and a 2024 second-round pick. Korver was immediately flipped as a piece in the deal with the Suns for Josh Jackson and DeAnthony Melton. Now, when I do these retrospective kind of videos, I really love pointing out opportunities where teams got lucky. And I don't do that to try and say a front office or a team wasn't smart and really good, but just to point out how badly you just also need luck on your side in sports sometimes. And Memphis was maybe the luckiest team of the night when they jumped 6 spots in the NBA draft lottery to land the 2nd overall pick, something they only had a 6.3% chance of doing. Getting a high draft pick is one thing, but getting a high lottery pick in the right draft class is franchise changing. And that's what Memphis landed themselves when they made the consensus pick at number 2 with Ja Morant. I refuse to make any redraft or Zion comparisons because Zion has struggled with injury, which isn't his fault, but Memphis has gotten the most value out of their selection, which is something that was already a huge talking point in the 2019-20 season. Ja Morant would go on to win Rookie of the Year after putting up incredible numbers and helping lead his team to playoff positioning. While Zion missed much of the season due to injury and load management, fans heavily debated if Zion should still win Rookie of the Year. After all, they felt he was still the best rookie and only underperformed in the games played category. Voters thought it wasn't close and Zion finished a distant 3rd. One of the funnier storylines of the season that I must bring up is the Grizzlies versus Andre Iguodala. As a favor to the Warriors, the Grizzlies were taking on Andre Iguodala's contract for a future first-round pick. This deal apparently made Andre Iguodala very unhappy as he refused to even show up for training camp as he waited on a buyout or a trade. It got to the point where Dillon Brooks was asked about Andre post-game, and he said that he can't wait until Iggy gets traded so that they can play against him. And Ja Morant ended up liking a tweet from a Memphis rapper that said F Iguodala. Eventually, Steph Curry came to Iguodala's defense, which started a small Ja Morant and Grizzlies versus Steph Curry and Andre Iguodala and Warriors feud. Iggy was traded at the deadline, packaged with Solomon Hill and Jay Crowder, who both actually had been important vets that helped the Grizz get in playoff positioning. In exchange, Memphis landed Dion Waiters and Justice Winslow. Memphis took a gamble on repairing Winslow's value as a strong defender with great playmaking ability. Dion Waiters was just bought out. Jay Crowder was one of the better returns from the Conley deal, making it pretty disappointing that they flipped him for nothing now. But like I mentioned earlier, they got so many other things right that it really camouflages the bad deals that they made. For example, Brandon Clark, who they got in the Conley deal, was all rookie that season and a really promising role player in Memphis's core. Before the NBA season was paused, the Grizzlies actually sat at 8th, seemingly set up to face the Lakers in the first round of the playoffs. As we all know, the season would infamously be shut down due to the pandemic. It would return in a Disneyland bubble with a new play-in format that forced the Grizzlies to compete and battle to hold their spot. I remember this being so controversial at the time because the Pelicans had one of the easier remaining schedules before the shutdown, and a lot of projection models had people believing that they would have overtaken Memphis for the last playoff spot. The Grizzlies had about a 3-game lead, which is how they ended up surviving the bubble seeding games to play Portland in the NBA's first play-in tournament game. The Blazers and Damian Lillard made a tremendous effort during the entire bubble, except the playoffs, and overtook Memphis for that final spot. But Ja and the Grizzlies showed clear signs of stardom in that matchup. Here is where, again, I would like to remind you that they have only tanked for one season where they got Jaren Jackson Jr. They actually just got lucky jumping high enough to grab Ja, combined with the smart moves they made around the peripheral like Jonas Valanciunas, Tyus Jones, Brandon Clark, and DeAnthony Melton. The following offseason comes with more smart draft decisions. Memphis made small deals that got them Desmond Bane of TCU and Xavier Tillman from Michigan State. Desmond Bane made all rookie and Xavier Tillman had an argument to be there too. Ja still missed time in his second season, but Jonas Valanciunas and Kyle Anderson stepping into larger roles elevated the team to playoff positioning once again. Memphis finished at 9th due to the NBA bringing back the play-in tournament though. The Grizzlies continued that streak of play-in appearances. This time around, they actually win in the play-in tournament, knocking off the Golden State Warriors to get the 8th playoff spot. Memphis would lose in 5 games to the Utah Jazz, but with Ja once more showing superstar flashes. Trading Conley and picking Morant was a transition of eras for the Grizzlies, a transition that takes multiple years back in the draft lottery for most other teams, yet less than 2 years removed from trading Mike, here the Grizzlies are trying to knock Conley and his team out of the playoffs. Though they didn't have a realistic chance of winning, this group has always looked capable and special. The past offseason looked like the Grizzlies may be looking to swap out some of their vets to build around the timeline of an up-and-coming superstar in his 3rd year. They trade up in the draft to select Zaire Williams, a long forward with all-star scoring potential and some defensive upside. But it cost them Jonas Valanciunas, who had an argument as their best player in the prior season. They brought in Steven Adams, a move that was intended to strengthen the defense at the cost of their offense, but the offense has jumped from 15th ranked to currently sitting at 8th, and the defense, which was 6th, is now 7th. This is because the Grizzlies get contributions from everyone. If Ja is out, well, Tyus Jones and DeAnthony Melton are stepping up. Dylan Brooks goes down, well, Killian Tilly, John Conchar, and Zaire Williams could have a career night. The front office has seemingly hit on all the right moves and brought in a brilliant coaching staff led by first-time coach Taylor Jenkins. The right chemistry, coach, and roster now has us asking if Memphis can already be considered a contender. And even if the answer is no, the fact that we're asking this 3 years removed from the start of this transition is a special story and why I wanted to make this video. That's all I have for you in this one though. I really appreciate it if you made it to the end. While you're here, check out my social media pages for inside looks at upcoming videos and reactions to live games or transactions. If you found yourself enjoying any part of this video, leaving a like is the perfect way to help me get this channel out to other NBA fans. And leave a comment telling me your thoughts on the Grizzlies and their hyper quick rebuild. Thank you for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.